Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us on this truly remarkable evening. I'm delighted to welcome everyone here tonight and those watching the live stream to the 10th and final annual lecture of the Stop MS Appeal, entitled Mechanisms, Milestones and Momentum, our Stop MS Appeal story. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick Moberly, Chief Executive of the MS Society. And I've had the privilege of being part of the MS Society for over 6 years. And it fills me with immense pride to reflect on the incredible progress we've made during this time. Progress that is only possible thanks to the tireless efforts of our brilliant staff, our volunteers nationwide, dedicated research colleagues, and of course, the unwavering support of people like you, people in this room. As we gather here tonight, it's important to remember that over 150,000 people in the UK live with MS. This condition is uniquely challenging and unpredictable, affecting each person differently. And it's this uncertainty that makes our mission so urgent. The appeal has enabled us to make bigger, bolder investments in MS research, bringing scientists across the world together to drive groundbreaking discoveries. And we truly believe we're now in touching distance of treatments that could slow or stop progression for everyone with MS. With a goal to raise £100 million by the end of this year, this appeal is really changing lives. So thanks to your credible support, we've already raised over £95 million, an astonishing achievement that stands as a testament to what we can accomplish together. But we still need your support more than ever to get us over the line and to get us to that £100 million target, which is where we're headed for the end of the year. Now, the work we're doing today will leave a lasting impact on people living with MS now and for generations to come. The Stop MS Appeal is not just about funding research, it's about hope. It's about showing the world what can be achieved when determination meets generosity and innovation. The MS Society is incredibly proud to be working with some of the world's leading scientists, and tonight's speaker, Professor Alan Thompson, is no exception. Professor Thompson is the Dean of the UCL Faculty of Brain Sciences and was an honorary consultant neurologist at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery, Queen's Square, for over 30 years. And he's been the chair of our Stop MS scientific and clinical ambassadors since the launch of the appeal, in fact, giving the inaugural Stop MS lecture back in 2016. Following the lecture, we're going to be joined by some of our Stop MS scientific ambassadors for a panel session. Thank you once again, Alan, for joining us and for sharing your insights with us this evening, which we're all really, really looking forward to. Now, during Alan's lectures, if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please submit them on Slido, and after the lecture, our panel of researchers will be able to answer a few of those questions. So all you need to do is to visit slido.com and submit a question using the event code #MSLecture25. So that's #MSLecture25. So in a minute, we will hand over to Alan. Really looking forward to that. But before we do so, we're going to hear from Roxy Murray, a passionate MS and disability rights advocate dedicated to inclusivity, diversity, and allyship. Roxy challenges exclusion in the medical, charity, and corporate sectors and empowers chronically ill individuals to embrace their identities. As a motivational speaker, Roxy champions self-empowerment and authenticity for disabled individuals. We're truly honoured to have them with us today to share some of their personal experience. So, Roxy, very warm welcome. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Nick, for that beautiful introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Roxy Murray, and I'm a proud, brown, queer disabled woman living with multiple sclerosis. And I'm honoured to be speaking with you today at this year's lecture staying focused and managing fatigue can feel like climbing a mountain. But disability doesn't mean broken. It means adapting, it means resilience. It means learning to move forward through a world on my own terms, even when the world wasn't designed for me. And that's why I speak up. That's why I advocate, because I want more for all of us. I want a future where Black, brown, queer, and disabled people aren't sidelined in healthcare or research, where we aren't considered rare cases, but we are seen, heard, and treated with urgency and respect. I want culturally competent care. I want accessible clinics for everybody living with MS. I want to see people like me in research, in campaigns, in leadership, not as afterthoughts, but as blueprints. And beyond advocacy, I want rest. I'm here to push for change, to build momentum for better research and better representation, better care, and more truth-telling about illness and identity. I want to see more Black and brown disabled people centered not as expectations, but as experts. MS may have slowed my body, but it still lit a fire within me. I'm not just surviving, I'm evolving. So let's keep this momentum going. Let's build new mechanisms that truly work for all of us. Let's honor every milestone, no matter how small, and let's move forward not quietly, not politely, but boldly, collectively, and with purpose. And finally, if you believe in the importance of representation, of equity, and of finding a cure, not for just some, but for all of us, please support the work that MS Society is doing. They're funding critical research, pushing for inclusive care, and helping build a future where no one is left behind, no matter who they are or how their MS shows up in their body. Your support helps move this mission forward. So let's do this all together. Let's create real, lasting change for everybody living with MS. Thank you.
Roxy, thank you so much for generously sharing your story with us and giving us a deeper understanding of your journey with MS, and for those very rousing and passionate words. I'm now delighted to welcome our speaker for the evening, Professor Alan Thompson. Alan, please come up, and we'll look forward to hearing your talk.
Lights are very strong up here, Roxy. I know you seem to manage very well. I'm struggling slightly. It's obviously a great pleasure to be asked to give this final lecture of the Stop MS Appeal. And I thought the title, Mechanisms, Milestones and Momentum, would allow us to summarize some of the extraordinary achievements of the last 10 years. As you all know, this appeal has taken place at a time of great change. In just a few decades, we've seen or gone from a limited understanding of relapsing MS to an explosion of increasingly life-changing treatments to reduce and prevent relapses. Our focus is now very much on progressive MS, an area that I've been involved in for the last 30 years or so. And it's become very much center stage, and it's certainly front and center of the Stop MS Appeal. I gave the first inaugural lecture in 2016, and that was entitled Stepping Up to a Global Challenge. And I've been told that what I said, because I don't remember so clearly back that 2016, that I emphasized rather tellingly that we needed a better understanding of mechanisms, that we needed to find treatments to slow and prevent progression, and we need to offer greater certainty about the future of all those affected by MS. And I think I really should emphasize that this campaign or this appeal, was incredibly bold, and Hilary and Michelle showed huge vision. It's a really ambitious campaign. And I hope you'll see through the lecture that it has been incredibly successful, both in terms of the money raised. I mean, 95 million is incredible, and a lot of it is thanks to the generosity of people in this room. Though, of course, there is that 5 million gap which we need to sort out. But also, and more importantly perhaps, what has been achieved through this funding, the research which I'll talk a little bit about. The ambitions are shown on this slide, and they are bold, and I think it's fair to say, and maybe you can decide at the end of the talk, that actually we've moved forward on all of these areas. A really big question is, of course, how do we stop MS? And this cartoon just indicates the areas you might wish to target. I've been told if I turn around you won't be able to hear me, so I'm going to try and do this. We can try and influence the immune system, and these cells here. More challengingly, we can try and encourage remyelination or repair, or protection, neuroprotection, and of course symptomatic management. These are the four key areas. And I think that, just to summarize that, prevent immune attacks, promote mild repair, and protect nerves from damage. They're the sort of key. I mean, it sounds rather simplistic, but they're all really, really challenging. And this is happening in an evolving landscape. And many of you will have seen slides like this, which indicate the increasing number of new treatments for MS, predominantly relapsing remitting MS. I'd go so far as to say there are very few neurological conditions that have seen such amazing therapeutic advances over the last 3 decades. And if you just look at what we had in 1996, and we thought, and it was a great breakthrough, and then you look at and this is really global ecosystem, because not all of these agents are available throughout the world, you'll see just how really different things are and how encouraging things are. And more importantly, for progressive MS, we now have a treatment for primary progressive MS, shown here, ocrelizumab. We also have a treatment for secondary progressive MS, siponimod. And they're a little like those early treatments for relapsing remitting MS. They're a great start, but of course we need to build on them and have more and more effective treatments. And most recently, we have a treatment for non-relapsing progressive MS. So it's great to see these changes, and it's really, really encouraging. But there's still a lot to do in this space. And 2 insights, which I think are really important, relate to what has happened in relation to progressive MS and how we understand it. And the first thing is that actually progression probably begins very, very early on in MS, but we're not aware of this. And this is a slide which just shows a biomarker for neurodegeneration and shows that actually it can change even before people have symptoms. So it's very, very early. And of course, that might be slightly worrying, but it's also really important, because if we can use that to identify what's going on early, we can influence early. And as you all know, the earlier we treat, the more effective the treatment is. And the other point I wanted to make before I go on to the main parts of the talk is this concept of PIRA, or progression independent of relapse activity. This may seem complex, but it's really quite straightforward. It's saying exactly the same thing, that even in relapsing remitting MS, there is, in some people, a low-grade progression occurring. And again, it says that if we have effective treatments for progression, which we will have, really effective treatments, they probably need to be started very early on in the condition. But of course, they can have an effect at any time. So these are 2 relatively recent and new concepts in the world of MS. And I think when I'm talking about what the appeal has achieved, I will be trying to do that in the context of what's happening in the greater world, if you like, of MS. And so the question then is, what has the Stop MS appeal achieved? And I think when we look at the bold ambitions, this is where the 3 words, mechanisms, milestones, and momentum, come. So improving our understanding of what goes wrong in MS to dramatically increase knowledge of mechanisms. And I'll begin with that. Then to talk a little bit what's been happening within clinical trials. I'll say a few brief words about that. And then the most important, in a way, is building momentum for the future, because there's a lot to be done and there's huge potential based on what we're doing at the moment. So understanding mechanisms is the first area to discuss. And you might ask, well, why do we need to know about mechanisms? Why do we need to know what's going on? And I've just listed a number of reasons why this is really important. It gives us some insight into when the condition begins. It actually helps us to understand the diagnosis, and I'll mention that in a minute. It informs how we describe the condition, but perhaps most importantly, it identifies potential targets for treatment around which we can build clinical trials using appropriate markers of activity. So mechanisms are fundamental, and it's something that Ian MacDonald, my mentor, used to say to me over and over again. So at least something he said has actually sunk in, which is good. So where have we got to in terms of mechanisms? Well, one thing is we have identified a lot of players. It's a complex environment. There are a lot of potential players. It's not just inflammation and damage to axons. There are cells like microglia and macrophages. There are mitochondria. These are all built into that mechanism. And actually, researchers funded by the Appeal have done a lot of good work around microglia and macrophages, mitochondrial injury, and oxidation byproducts. The relationship of these mechanisms is not clear, but it's getting clearer. And we need to understand them and understand how they work. Inflammation, oxidative stress, iron toxicity, microglial activity, if we're going to really have effective treatments for progression, drugs that really stop progression occurring. One piece of work by Veronica Miron, who was funded by the Appeal, looks at remyelination, and she showed that it requires the death of pro-inflammatory microglia for remyelination to occur. She did some really lovely work, and her study was included in a paper demonstrating how women researchers have made such a huge contribution to our step change in MS. So that's one area. There are two others I was going to mention. One is Alberto Calvi, who actually looked at expanding lesions. So on MRI, we see the lesions, but we now realize that when lesions enlarge, it often is associated or related to increasing disability. So we did some very nice work at Queen Square, looking at that and showing the relationship with disability. And the third area I was going to mention was Don Mahad's work. Again, he's been studying mitochondria for many, many years, and basically showing that if mitochondria are more mobile, they can actually protect the axon more effectively. And he's gone on from that work to look at a drug used in diabetes to see if it can be used to test to preserve axons. So these are important mechanistic pieces of work that are happening here and feeding into the general body of work in MS. And thinking a little more broadly and just in brief, mechanisms are absolutely critical when we're talking about making a diagnosis and describing MS. And a lot of recent work, there's been a new set of diagnostic criteria. I was led the first, not the first one, but the last one back in 2017, which uses MRI to help make a diagnosis. I just wanted to make the point that in the new set, we're starting to use more subtle mechanistic markers, looking at, for example, this is the central vein sign. You see lesions actually around the central vein, incredibly specific for MS. And another finding which is incorporated into the latest diagnostic criteria, which have been submitted for publication, but it's a lengthy process to get papers published. Particularly if you don't, anyway, I won't say anymore. It's a lengthy process. And here you see these are paramagnetic rim lesions. So they're not very common, but they are highly specific for MS. And you might, there's a lesion here, and you might be able to make out that dark rim, which is paramagnetic. So again, we're becoming more sophisticated and more pathologically based. So we're actually looking at mechanisms, and I think that's really important. Anyway, it was just an aside. And similarly, when we're looking at how we describe MS, relapsing, remitting, primary progressive, secondary progressive, which we now believe is really a continuum, and some of these divisions are perhaps artificial or they're not necessarily as robust as we thought. We've been looking at redefining the clinical course, which is a difficult thing to do. This is the original description way back in 1996, revisions into 2013. But the most recent paper, which came out in The Lancet 2 years ago now, it actually tries to look at the mechanisms underpinning MS and looking at how that might feed into how we describe it. So mechanisms are key, and I think I've talked about them for long enough, so I'll stop on that, and I hope you're all convinced. And I'll move on to talk for a few minutes on trial milestones. And this is the cartoon I showed earlier. And here I've just put down some of the trials that are going on, that are looking at the immune system, looking at remyelination less, looking at neuroprotection, and a little bit on symptom management. Just to give a feel for how much is actually happening in the field, which is quite considerable. And the next slide just gives you an indication of where those drugs or agents are actually targeting B cells, T cells, remyelination, and neuroprotection. So there's a lot of activity in the field, and that is extremely positive. And this is perhaps the most positive slide of all that I'm going to show, which goes back to 2012. This is with Tim Cutsey. We did this slide over the last few days. There were 4 trials going on in progressive MS, 3 on immune therapies, 1 on neuroprotection. We now have closer to 50. So there is a lot going on, and that is really, really encouraging. And what's the Stop MS appeal been doing to support this? Well, huge things, and is actually the trials we'll talk about now are really world leading. And the first, of course, is the MS Smart that Jeremy, who's going to be on the panel, so you can ask him all the difficult questions later, don't ask me any. He did this incredible trial design where there were 3 arms, and where he looked at 3 different agents at the same time. So this was absolutely innovative for MS. The trial itself was not positive, i.e. it was negative, but it was the first attempt at this really, really good approach. And then on to looking at, well, what other drugs might we look at, the systematic evaluation of what drugs were available, which was done again, supported by the appeal, and now what's called octopus, because, and here we come into the numbers of arms and legs of an octopus, which no one ever agrees on. But the point it's making is that you can have a number of treatment arms, and you can evaluate them early on and then stop them if they don't show benefit, and you can add in more treatments as you go. So you really have a clinical trials platform. And at the moment, the 2 agents that are being looked at are metformin, which you've heard of earlier, and lipoic acid. So that's a really, really important development internationally. And, the UK MS Society and the appeal is leading the field internationally. It's important to realise the contribution that is made. Of course, we've also had the largest academic-led trial for progressive MS, and that's the statin trial. The phase 2 trial was positive. This again led by Jeremy, but unfortunately the phase 3 trial was not. It was an incredible achievement, a truly nationwide achievement, and just again showed our leadership in the field, and again supported by the appeal. And I should mention Chariot MS, which is a study looking at people that are quite disabled and looking at upper limb function and looking at the agent at cladribine, and that's Klaus Meyer's study. So again, a lot going on. And there are new strategies to enhance myelin repair, protect nerves. I just mentioned 2 or 3. This is Alistair Cole's study looking at bexarotene. I always have trouble pronouncing that, but this was again looking to see if it could encourage remyelination. It actually didn't show a positive result, but there was a very interesting study led by Robin Franklin, again, which you'll be familiar with, showing that metformin actually rejuvenates aged stem cells. That word rejuvenation is always very encouraging as you get older, but it's really important study. And so leading on from that work is another study funded by the appeal, which is looking at a combination of clemastine, which is a drug that has been looked at earlier and showed some indication for remyelination, and metformin. So again, a lot going on in the area and really encouraging to see. And now I just turn to the last part of my talk, and I hope I'm not going over time, about building momentum. And I think there's lots of developments over the years, and the UK MS Society has been fundamentally involved in all of them. One is the International Progressive MS Alliance, which I led for a number of years, which brought together, as it suggests, really world leaders in MS and lots of scientists to actually look at how we, again, the three areas, how we understand progression, accelerate clinical trials, and enhance well-being. And this has been an incredibly productive international collaboration. If you have a major problem, and progressive MS is a challenging problem, then you need an international collaboration to address it. And progression, the clinical expression of progression is very complicated. You've got the injury mechanisms, which I've mentioned a little bit earlier. You've got compensatory mechanisms like repair and remyelination. You have our brain reserve, which can help us up to a point. And you have biological aging, which we're only beginning to appreciate now, has a real impact on MS and interacts with MS in a complicated way. And around all of that, you have a whole range of different factors, including comorbidities like diabetes and heart disease that have a really fundamental effect on our MS. So a few more areas of development. One is, as we're moving forward, can we tailor drugs to the individual? This is Olga Ciccarelli's work, where she's looking at a whole range of different biomarkers for the same patient to try and build a character, build a scheme for that patient, which might then indicate what treatments might work best for them. A really ambitious study, but really important. Another very challenging study, which is looking at MS subtypes, is work by Arman Assaji, who looks at MRI scans and showed that there were 3 patterns of activity in lead. And depending on which pattern he saw, they actually had an effect on your treatment response. So that's really important, looking at MS subtypes. And another development looking at MS subtypes is Anna Williams' really lovely work looking at cell responses and in terms of remyelination, and seeing if you can stratify patients in a way that would then allow you to target specific treatments. So we can look at this question in a number of different ways, but these are all studies that have been supported by the MS appeal. And finally, we need to think holistically about managing and treating MS, all aspects, quality of life intervention targets, and you can see them all listed on this slide here, which I'm not going to go into, but comorbidities is, of course, a key element of that. And here, I think doing studies in symptomatic treatment is extremely difficult. And Rona Ross-Morris's work has been amazing. This is looking at fatigue. This is one of the most troubling and difficult symptoms in MS, one of the most disabling, but also one of the most least understood. And this is just outlining some of her work, the studies that she's been doing, Refuel MS, and also fatigue care, something you might like to ask her about later on this evening. So I'm coming to a close now. You might be pleased to hear, I'm not sure, depending on how you've been getting on. These are the 3 areas that we started out with, and I hope you feel that actually we've addressed all 3 of them. We haven't resolved all 3, but we've moved the dial on each of these forward. And that's a remarkable achievement. And again, I will just go back to say that's because of the Stop MS appeal. It's because of the funding that was received to do that, incredibly generous funding, and the way in which that money was actually spent. However, my final slide is just to give a sense of the areas that we still need to work on. And I've put stopping progression number 1, not just because it's what I've been working on for years, because I think it is probably the most important, but there are a number of other questions, and I've listed them here. So I'd conclude by saying, I hope you agree that the last 10 years have been quite extraordinary in what has been achieved. there is much more to be done, but we're in a really good place, and there's some extraordinary work has been done. Thank you very much.
It's a bit hard to follow that with my name up there, but thank you so much, Alan. That was, I guess, as informative as it was inspiring, and it does really feel quite fitting that you should give the last lecture ever. No, not ever. Good evening, everyone. I'm Emma Gray, and I'm Director of Research, and it's my absolute pleasure to be chairing the panel session. Alan's told me I'm not allowed to ask him questions, so we'll see how that goes. And just an aside, like, I've worked for the MS Society since 2012, and to actually be here this close genuinely is really, really emotional. It's a really good night, so this is great. Thank you, Alan. Okay, so can I ask the panel, they know who they are, to make their way onto the stage, and I'll start the introduction so we can do it quickly so I can ask some questions. So Alan needs no further introduction, and we've got Professor Jeremy Chataway joining us as well, who's Professor of Neurology at UCL and the National Hospital for Queen Square. He's Principal Investigator, as you've heard, of MS SMART and MS STAT2 trials, and is now leading Octopus. Rona Moss-Morris, you've also seen her work highlighted, is Professor of Psychology as Applied to Medicine at the Institute of Psychiatry. Sorry, wrong way around, isn't it, Rona? Psychology, Psychiatry and Neuroscience at King's College London. Richard Reynolds, on the end there, who's also given one of these lectures back in the day, is Professor of Cellular Neurobiology at Imperial College London, and the Chief Scientific Advisor of the MS Society Tissue Bank, which he set up in 1998, and he personally collected the first brain. Is that correct? Yeah, it's true. And I'm also absolutely delighted to be joined by Ragnar Al-Najjar and Molly McKeon, who are PhD students at the University of Cambridge Centre of Excellence that's been funded by this appeal, who are studying how genes affect MS progression, and you're very welcome to join us. Thank you. So we're going low tech for the questions. They're on my phone. So let's see if Slido is working. It's not working for everyone in the audience. Okay. So I have to pick a question, and I will let you know who it's going to before I say it. So you've got about 3 seconds to panic, okay? Okay. Jeremy, I'm afraid you're first. Do you think it will be pharma trials or charity-funded... Oh, it's gone. Oh, hang on. No, the questions. Okay, we'll start again. Okay, Rona, can I ask you? No, you're off the hook because it just disappeared. Oh, it disappeared. I don't know if it's coming back. Okay, no, that's fine. We're going to ask Rona a question. Following Roxy's powerful speech, are these trials and all this research actively helping people from underrepresented groups to be able to take part? Do you think we're getting better at doing this?
I think we're getting better, but I think we've got a long way to go. So it's a great pleasure working with people like Roxy to sort of help inform us, working very closely. So I think increasingly we've got a lot better at working with people with MS from diverse groups. Certainly at the early stage of the research, where we're not doing as well, is getting people into our studies. And I think working with the communities is going to be an ongoing job so that we are meeting the needs of people from diverse communities.
Thank you. Jeremy, the question I was going to ask you has reappeared. I think it's just operator error, because it's, I think as they come up, they go down. Oh, it's gone again. Oh, God. Okay, so, I found it again. Sorry, everyone. Okay, Jeremy, do you think it'll be pharma trials or charity-funded trials that find treatments and stop progression?
I think both. I think both. I think there's room for everyone, wherever it comes from, so I think it'll be both.
Okay. Okay, and then am I going to ask you, actually, Alan told me I wasn't allowed to ask him a question. Is that okay?
Jeremy could give the right answer.
Okay, well, we'll ask Alan, and then if we don't like the answer, we'll ask Jeremy. So outside of DMTs, what do you think is critical for anyone living with MS to do to slow their own progression?
Can you say that again?
Is it a horrible one?
No, go on.
Outside of DMTs,
yeah.
What do you think is critical for anyone living with MS to do to slow their own progression? So what control can people take over their condition?
Okay, well, there's a lot. And actually, I think doing DMTs without doing everything else is not a good idea. So it doesn't get you out of all I was going to say all the hard work.
You had the slide with all the circles.
Well, I know there's an awful lot on that slide, and I'm always guilty of showing too many slides that have too much on them. But and I've never learned over the years. But so I think maintaining a really good quality of life. So actually looking after yourself, giving yourself time. I know exercise, even light exercise, helps. Diet, although we don't understand diet very well, is important. And managing any other conditions that occur. So, as you get older, he said with some feeling, you pick up all sorts of other things. And there is a tendency among our medical colleagues to say, oh, well, you have MS, so that's you just have to get on. These other conditions need to be treated as effectively and actively as possible. And we know that they're not. So actually making a bit of a fuss, having a good neurologist, and there are such things, who will really advocate to make sure you get access to treatment is really important. I mean, there's a lot. You want to lead as normal a life as you possibly can, outside of DMTs.
Jeremy, is there anything you'd want to add to that?
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, stopping smoking. I think exercise, physiotherapy is essential, good diet. As Alan says, the comorbidities, the vascular comorbidities, really good control of hypertension, high cholesterol, I think they're essential. So those are the sort of the core.
And this comes back to, I think, your message you were saying at the end, Alan, about holistic management of MS. You need all the pieces. It's not just DMT. I think we're very focused on got to find the right DMT, but I think we've now realised it's a bigger picture than that, isn't it?
I think it's really important, and when making a diagnosis, the first step is to talk about how you manage that, and then subsequent steps are about the drug treatments, but it's not the other way around. Yeah. And drug treatments on their own just won't be enough.
Okay, Richard, I'm going to ask you a question, and this, I guess, this is, you were telling Nick and I about all the years you've worked in MS research. So this question is for you. So. Oh, it's gone. God, I set it up as well. Oh. Okay. So what made you decide to do MS research rather than something else? And this comes from a person with MS. I always find that really grateful and inspiring to hear the sort of reasons why. Why was it 44 years you said you've been? Sorry.
Sadly,
sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or that's probably good, but yes. So how did I get into MS research? So I was always fascinated by the brain, because it's the most amazing organ, piece of tissue. It's incredible. And my first job was actually studying what went wrong in some childhood diseases where the children don't make enough myelin, which is what is wrapped around our nerve fibers to help them send messages. And that naturally went on to why can it be destroyed in MS? How is it destroyed? And how does that cause all the symptoms of MS? And what can we do about that? So it kind of started at a pediatric level, actually, and then worked into adults. And then my second job was MS, and it's been like that ever since.
Any regrets?
None whatsoever. I have to say, I get criticized sometimes for getting too excited. But I don't think that's a valid criticism. I think the research is just such an exciting thing to be able to do. And to be able to do it for that long is an absolute privilege, especially in the field of MS.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, so I'm going to ask Molly and Ragnar a question. It's the same question. I'll say who goes first. So, does hearing all the progress, everything you've heard tonight and being part of MS research, inspire you for your future careers? And how do you think your research will play a role in stopping MS? Ragnar, do you want to go first?
Yes. So definitely exciting us. And the summary over the 10 years by Professor Allen is amazing. The most exciting part is how McDonald criteria now changed based on what we found on clinical trials. Finally, some findings from MRI and biomarkers were added to the criteria to add diagnosis. For the future, I hope to be more focused on what happens before MS, especially as MS usually thought as adult onset disease. I'm thinking it might be also ongoing process since childhood. And now many neural disease have found link with childhood, even Alzheimer's disease. So this excites me that now it is very underexplored area in MS. Hopefully there will be more progress in the future in this area.
Molly, are you inspired? And what are you going to do to fix it?
Definitely. So similar to Ragda, and I'm really excited by all of the progress in the mechanisms underlying progression, because really without understanding what you're working with, you can't develop targets for drugs for progression. So in my own work, we're looking at how genetic changes influence the course of MS and how that can give us a clue to develop treatments to specifically target progression. So I'm really excited to see where that leads and how it can feed into the clinical trials working on myelin repair based in Cambridge. So I think it's really translating all of the immense progress in the mechanisms, translating them to drug targets and trials, which really excites me going forward.
Thank you. Rona, one for you. I mean, you should be able to give a thorough answer to this. People living with MS often experience... Oh, my dad's ringing me now. Oh, my God. Sorry. This is why we shouldn't do it on my phone. Hang on. Should I answer it? How do I clear it? Without answering it. Sorry. Is it answered? No. Oh God, sorry. I'm completely thrown now. Sorry. We need to get the iPads fixed. People living with MS often experience brain fog and fatigue. So which treatments are proven to help these symptoms?
Good question. So at this stage, the interesting thing, but perhaps not necessarily the most helpful for people, is that the drug treatments haven't helped for these conditions so far. So that although there are drugs called amantadine, for instance, like amantadine, that are sometimes offered, the clinical trials suggest actually that these over the long term are not helpful. But we do find, the good news is that we do find that there are more behavioral interventions. So these include helping people manage fatigue in different ways, and we do this by using a technique called cognitive behavioral therapy, helping people engage in exercise, which, again, a lot of these things we all say to people, lead a healthier life and et cetera, but actually these things are very difficult to do in the context of MS. So part of the work that we're doing, funded partly by this campaign too, is to find ways to support people in being able to do that, and that's a big project that we're just launching now, which is quite exciting. So yes, we do know what works, but it's kind of how do we get this out to everybody, which is where we're at the moment.
Okay, and I guess it's sort of along the same lines to Jeremy here. Different type of treatment. So if an effective treatment is identified through Octopus, which we're all very much hoping for, no pressure. It's moved. Sorry, this is really poor moderation. Slido moves them. I don't know what to do. I think the question was, if you find a successful treatment in Octopus, what are the routes to market? How long is it going to take for someone to actually, I'm just ad-libbing now, someone actually to get that drug?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
When we did the simvastatin trial, we spent a lot of time thinking about that in advance. So the NHS had a repurposing group which we worked with, and we interacted with the MHRA, and so one could approach the NICE body to do that. So I think there are very much routes to access for drugs, repurposed drugs as they come through. There's a great deal of interest in that generally. For example, aspirin might have sort of anti-cancer effects, and there was an article about that today. So these routes exist, so they can be delivered to people. They're found to be effective as soon as possible.
Without putting you on the spot, but I'm going to, what timescale are we talking? 5 to 10 years, 10 to 15, 15 to 20?
Yeah, I think it'll be sooner. I mean, if you look at to do a phase 3 trial maybe takes about 5 years. So we're halfway through Octopus, so 3 years or something like that if one of the agents was found to be effective, to have the results and then take it on. So these are repurposed drugs, so the barrier is very low because the toxicology is well known. So the advantage of using repurposed drugs is that you can move on fairly quickly if you get a positive result.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to ask myself a question here. When will we know the results of the clemastine and metformin trial? I'm sure the Cambridge lot can tell me, but I think we'll know at ECTRIMS. Is that still Alistair's plan?
As far as we know.
So we'll know by the sort of September time, towards the end of the year, we'll be able to share that. So that's really, really exciting to see that come through. That's happened compared to the length of time it took to do Bexarotene. That one's happened pretty quickly. It's really exciting. Okay, Alan, one for you.
Yep.
Despite, so this is a personal question from somebody, but it's a greater theme. Despite MRI scans showing no change in 5 years, my MS symptoms are worsening, and I've been told I have smouldering MS. Can you know, in layman terms, can you explain what that is to somebody to understand?
Well, okay. So I've got a bias here, so I really dislike this term very much, and I don't use it ever. So it's difficult. I'm probably
pick your term, but still explain it.
So what? But I think so. The question really is more about if the MRI isn't changing, why am I getting worse?
Yeah.
And leaving unpleasant terms out of it. It's because the MRI is very good. I mean, it shows new lesions. It shows when there's expanding lesions. But there's a lot going on within the lesion and within the tissue around the lesions, and that's not always picked up on routine MRI. So, I mean, what you'd be better off saying is that there is low-grade activity, which is not manifest in lesions, but is real. Because sometimes people think, well, if the scan is normal, then, I mean, am I really getting worse? Or does the neurologist think I'm just, you know, making it up? But of course they're not, and they are changing, and some of that change just isn't picked up. The other area, of course, is the spinal cord, which is not always imaged, and where you can see change over time, both in terms of new lesions, but also just intrinsic change within lesions or within normal appearing white matter. So sorry for the bias, but I just leave out the term and say that MRI is great, but it's not everything, and it's what you feel and what you think is happening is what's important, not what's on the scan, or what the neurologist thinks even.
Does the other neurologist agree? Been dismissed. Well, we'll move on. Thank you, Alan. Okay. I guess there's a question for Jeremy, and I guess, Alan, if you want to chip in at all. Actually, Ragda and Molly might want to as well. So there's a lot of talk about metformin. Actually, I'm going to ask who wants to do this afterwards, so I'm going to give you free rein. There's a lot of talk about metformin and MS. What makes it such an exciting drug? And is the research looking good for people with MS? So I guess, I don't know, Molly, if any of this, your area of research talk about it, the mechanisms and why it's interesting?
I think so.
Go for it. You're amongst friends.
I think it's its capacity to. So in animal studies based in the Cambridge Centre for Myelin Repair, I think they found that it had the capacity to rejuvenate the cells that remyelinate, basically. So our capacity to remyelinate seems to kind of decline over time, and metformin was able to kind of make old versions of these cells kind of younger and more able to myelinate. So I think that's kind of biologically what we know about metformin in the lab, and so that's why it's been trialled in clinical trials. So it'll be interesting to see if it has the same capacity in people.
And Jeremy, in Octopus, I mean, it's of interest for broader mechanisms as well. Would you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think metformin is a very interesting molecule. I mean, it's being trialled in sort of anti-aging drugs, regenerative. I mean, the work from the Cambridge laboratory I thought was amazing, and that's really was one of our top picks to go into trial to see indeed in humans with progressive disease whether it can have that effect. So I'm really excited about metformin.
Yeah. I've just had technical guidance from the team to tell me if I click recent, they don't move, and there's actually a monitor there, so this is quite embarrassing. But now I don't know where to look. Okay, yes, it's all too much. Okay, Jeremy, another one for you, and this is about MS-STAT2. I mean, and there's a comment here about it wasn't shown to be a neuroprotective treatment, but what were the benefits of doing this trial? And I guess what are the benefits of people being in trial?
Yeah, so MS-STAT2 was amazing. I think it was a great testament, for the Stop MS appeal and the community that we did that trial. There's 1,000 people with second progressive multiple sclerosis. It was sort of industry standard. We took it through COVID, and I think that shows the dedication of everyone that took part in that. And we established the clinical trials network that could produce that standard of trial. So, and just being in trial is a very, very positive thing, as some of you will know. Interacting on a regular basis with people that have knowledge and great interest and are really devoted to doing something about progressive multiple sclerosis. So just the being in trial is exciting in its own right. So I think that came to me, I mean, disappointingly, as we know, it didn't show an effect, but many people who took part in that trial afterwards said how much it meant for them to be in trial. And I think that really sustains us when we do this work. We move on now to Octopus with the Clinical Trials Network. It's really, really important to do this in progressive multiple sclerosis, which, once upon a time we didn't. And this is the sort of the final barrier.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that STAT2, the recruitment and the infrastructure in the UK that was developed as a result of it has meant, I'm not saying Octopus recruitment's been easy, but it has led the way and created that infrastructure.
Yeah, no, it has.
That isn't to be underestimated. Without that, you can't deliver trials.
No, exactly. I mean, Octopus now, we have over 500 people in trial, and we're sort of opening up new centres all the time. So that infrastructure, that can do, the know that we can do it, funded by the MS Society, by the Stop MS appeal, is the kind of hard readout of all the efforts that we do.
And Richard, someone says, you mentioned you collect brains. This is your hobby. So I guess what's been your biggest discovery you think you've made from collecting and looking at brains over the years, over the 44 years? What's your number one discovery?
Number one discovery. Wow, that's difficult.
Pick one. And we've only got 2 minutes left, so you have to do it quickly.
I think it was the identification, and Alan has talked about that, of B lymphocytes being so important in causing some of the damage or driving some of the progression. And we noticed that in the brains probably 15 years ago, and it's been a long haul to work out why that is the case and what are those B cells making, and what molecules are they making, which then drive progression. And we got to the point where we have identified quite a number of them. So we've moved past what Alan was talking about. Alan does say some good things sometimes. It's really good. Which was the sledgehammer approach, where we get rid of all those B cells, to identifying the molecules that they are making that cause the progression, so we can be more targeted. So I think that's the most important thing from our research on the brains that
and that's been fundamental for treatment development. It's not to be underestimated. So, all right, I'm going to ask one quick question to everybody. I'm getting several messages via different platform to say hurry up. So in 20 seconds, I'm going to go along the line, and I want you to give your comments on what you hope MS research will achieve in the next 10 years. So, Richard, if you go first.
Oh, that follows on from the last one. That's great.
So, but you've had your moment, so really quickly.
Really quick. So, I think we've gone past this sledgehammer moment where we've got the first drug that does affect progression in some way. There's a whole cascade of other drug targets and drugs coming behind that. So we're going to be in the position of saying, oh no, there's too many. Which ones are we going to choose to test now, rather than hunting for ones that are worth testing?
Okay, thanks. Alan, 20 seconds. You've had a lot of 20 seconds, but...
I'd want an effective treatment that stops progression. Simple as that.
Ragda?
I want to combine more of the genetic, epigenetic, and multi-omics data together to have a more personalized medicine or treatment for patient, and maybe a redefine of people at risk of MS based on these data.
Okay. Molly?
Yeah. Similar, I'd want to, at diagnosis, be able to give, I'm not a clinician myself, but use science to give people a better understanding of how their MS is likely to progress, and use that to inform treatment decisions, and have more treatments specifically for progression in our armory to actually intervene at that early stage.
Thanks, Verena.
I'd like to see much better integrated care, so that we don't treat people's physical and mental health separately, and that it's more part of the routine offer when people come to MS services.
Yeah, no, I'd like to have a lot of choice about anti-progressive DMTs, like we have now with relapsing DMTs, which is fantastic, having come on that journey over these last decades. So that's very much what I want, and I think that's what we'll have in the next 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm afraid that is all we have time for, folks. Can we give a round of applause to our fantastic panel? And thank you to yourselves for the really thoughtful questions. But before I invite Nick back up, I have to do the awkward thing of reminding you of the £5 million gap. This is not usually in my job description, but we do really still need your help. We're very close. For technical-minded people, there's a QR code in your brochure you can scan. For the low-tech people, I think the team will just take your money outside. So choose your method. But thank you so much to everybody. And Nick, do you want to come back up? And you have to stay there. You stay there. Thanks.
So thank you, Emma, and thank you so much to all our incredible speakers and guest panels for being here tonight. Really do appreciate it. A particular thank you to our Stop MS research ambassadors for all your support, and we do, I believe, have a little something for you that is going to be brought up. Here it comes.
You doing it?
I think you go ahead.
Doing it, am I? My great glamorous box.
Oh.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire, and panel, thanks again for an absolutely brilliant evening and for everything you do outside of this wonderful lecture to help drive the research cause forward. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for your contribution. And I also want to say a big thank you to you all for joining us here tonight. Your presence and support really do mean the world to us. Now, for guests who are here in person, I'd like to welcome you all to stay for a drink and an opportunity to speak to our wonderful researchers and staff. So if you would like to please exit the theatre now, and our team will direct you back to the gallery room. I hope tonight has left you all inspired and filled with hope for what we can achieve together. And just want to wish you all a wonderful night ahead, and thank you again so much for being with us. Thank you all.